G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a brilliant weekend as well. Now I did leave some of you hanging yesterday, but I got the phone call off my oncologist after I'd already uploaded the video. I should have pinned a comment, I apologise, but seemingly good news is very far between for my health at the moment, but I actually got some okay news yesterday. I was waiting on more advanced genetic testing and that had come back. It took about 3 weeks to 4 weeks from my surgery and that shows no different than what the initial testing was. Now that initial testing, as we know, that's not great because the tumour has got worse both in size and the metabolic rate and other areas, but at least it's not any worse than that. So the oncologist is going to have a meeting with me over the next fortnight and we're going to discuss options because the chemotherapy I had last time made me so unbelievably sick. We don't know if we can go down that road again. But as always, guys, thank you for all your support. And if I have to have time off, I do apologise, but I'll do the absolute best that I can. Now, today we, of course, as always, have a lot to go over. So, look, we need to look at this Oreshnik. Well, it depends what you want to call it. It's probably not an ICBM, but more a medium-range ballistic missile. The effect on target is what we're after here, but we need to talk about what may have that actually been targeting. Was it to send a message, or was there something else that was going for? We're going to look at videos. We're going to look at what Putin has said. But first off, I want to look at the maps. As today, deep state Ukrainian map has shown that Russia has gained 62 kilometre squares just in the past 24 hours. And this is the fastest advancement since very early in 2022. And many pages saying that there is a growing crisis in Velika Novosilka as well. So look, let's start just with a quick map roundup and then I'll talk about that ballistic missile. So look, this is where we should probably start on this. This gives us an idea of these exponential gains. Now, many people just think the war is linear. It is absolutely not. And the biggest trend that should be concerning is that these gains, not only are they steady, but they're steadily increasing exponentially as well. And as you can see, for November the 23rd, that Russia has now cracked that 500 kilometre squares only on the 20th, which is more than all the previous months. So not only are they continuing to advance, but they're continuing to advance actually quicker, which is a large concern. So we will see what the coming months bring. Will there be a lull in the battle as it gets muddy, as it gets snowy? Some say yes, some say no. Again, one thing is, time will tell us how this goes, and we will get more data from Warmapper as we go. I wish that Suryak, who we use a lot, who showed these updates yesterday that we're seeing today, I wish that he did like a month kilometre square, at least something close to that. So just to get an idea of different perspectives. So here we have Ukraine in the center of your screen, of course, the capital of Kyiv. Now, if you want me to show you where that Oreshnik missile landed, it was in Dnipro here, but we'll go there in a little bit. But as you can see, we are fairly zoomed out, and you can see this red check on this map, which is showing Russian gains in the past 24 hours, you can see from a long way out. This is a very, very large advancement. Let's go point to point. We're talking 7.5 kilometers at the extreme, but this is a hell of a long way. Say 10 by 6, 10 by 7. That is a really massive gain, especially as this is coming up to those fortifications and it hasn't stopped Russia's advances in Kursk and down in other areas of the front line, and Velika Novosilka here, which I think that this may be more of a primary. I would have said Kurkov was the primary and this was an alternate. Maybe this is number one priority at the moment. Again, we will see. But let's talk about the situation in here and have a look at some geolocated footage of where we know where the Russian forces are. So some prominent Ukrainian pages have said the news coming from Velika Novosilka area is very bad. There is no way to sugarcoat it. The area has reached crisis and needs immediate intervention. And then further we go to this from deep state, but immediate intervention. I've said this is where what's needed there is highly trained offensive level troops in large numbers. Where are they? Well, they've been pushed up into Kursk and they're still there. So And I don't know if they can be withdrawn because Russia may push across into Sumy. So I believe that has really created a rock and a hard place. So Deep State talk about this and show where these gains are being made, where Russia is pushing. And they say extremely difficult times near Velika Novosilka. Only today, the enemy stormed several columns, one of at least 5 in Novosilka itself, and more of these dropping guys into the village itself, into Rozdolno, which I'll show you in a second. The enemy was along these roads in columns as well, and further landing parties right near Velika Novosilka. Unfortunately, the defense was not very reliable. The enemy felt it immediately, managing to relatively quickly attract reserves, which were expected to be used for assaults towards this spill. So the defense there wasn't up to the standards. Russia went, whoa, defense isn't, let's move in. This for a 7 kilometer, what did I say, in this direction, let's just go from here, we'll be somewhat conservative, 6 kilometer advancement. There would have to be large, like very large losses in this for that advance in a day. Again, we'll get more of an idea once that comes. But this is what I wanted to look at. So there's geolocation that's sitting just in here on Rozdolne. Now, there are many saying that there is active fighting in Rozdolne. So if you line these up, it's just around here. The exact position doesn't really matter. Some go, oh, you don't have the exact spot. We're within the tree line. It's close enough. Just do like 8-figure, we'll see even 6-figure military grid will be enough. But this is what I want to show you. And I can't show you the video, but this is off a Russian FPV drone targeting this entranceway to a Ukrainian trench. And I've seen a lot of Ukrainian pages also saying this is what you get when you don't have trenches that you can defend against these drones. And this is what I've said from that interview back in one of these directions with a guy who I know who's been fighting there for years. He's saying everything starts and stops with poor trenches. That if you can't bring the F-16 into battle because the trenches aren't good enough to have man pads to take down other systems. And he said it all, the butterfly effect is shit trenches. That is fixable. It's not as expensive as other things, but he did say it potentially is too late. And this is what we're seeing is these drones going through, and this is a fairly fortified trench. So you can see it's like steel container under the ground here. Say, it's hard on this angle, but I'd say maybe 6 feet under this earth here, and there was an entrance way that was like a zigzag with logs into here, and there are Ukrainian forces in the footage here. But this is a fairly well-prepared defensive position, and these positions are coming under control very, very quickly. Now, this was from Creamy Caprice, who shared that footage if you'd like to go see it. Active military operations in this area. Attack of Ukrainian armed forces with armoured vehicles in the direction of positions of the Russian forces. So this is where we saw a lot of this footage was Ukrainian attacks back into here, but also then these Russian FPV drones south of Rozdolne by these Russian FPV drones and detonations of ammunition. It's about a 4-minute long video, but more than 4Ks to the northern outreach of Velika Novosilka. Now, we have spoken before. If that area comes under control, if this area comes under control, it creates one, massive problems because then it's turned back a lot of gains and further than the 23 offensive. But for the defensive positions in here, where they really started well down, sort of in here, it's creating a huge problem, especially then with Russia pushing on Kursk as well. Do not let someone downplay how important this area is at the moment. This is why Russia is pouring soldiers into here to try and capture more areas. Now, let's then move across if the map will let me. So we see just out from Selyadov, we see further Russian push. Syriac showed this yesterday, and it seems like I say this all the time. I'll show you something, and then Syriac has shown it the day prior. But we can see some of the grey zone shift in here too, all the way in through then this Romanivka as well. So then there is some contested ground all the way up into here, and this salient that I think we'll see a withdrawal out of here fairly soon. But we want to talk about Ilinikia down in here. So where I've put this red dot, which is close enough to where this shed is lying, where my cursor is at the moment, we then see a major Russian armoured column then attacking in this direction and dropping off troops in a tree line and further fighting. As you can see, Ukrainian artillery targeting that Russian column as well. Now, before we move up north into Kursk, I want to make a quick pit stop, turn this back on, and a quick pit stop into Toretsk, where we do see the grey zone and red check increasing, although we do know this area still is being ignored up in here. One thing I will say, that Deep State has shown over 500 square kilometres. It is probably far more than that, because areas such as Chasiv Yar and other areas in Toretsk, Nebelivkia, from geolocations are not being shown, but we can see some red check in this direction here. Now, this is what I want to show you. This is from a Russian point of view of the massive Russian shelling going on in Toretsk at the moment, just absolutely leveling this area as there are infantry assault operations going on. I don't have a geolocation for that. You're just going to have to take the word for it that that is Toretsk. If that's older footage or something, I apologize. I just saw it come out today and say, like, today from Toretsk, from a fairly reliable page, at least for footage there. So let's move up a little bit more, and we do see around Kopanki as well. This is sort of opened up from Berestov through here. Since Russia then reached the Oskil, logistics into here have been very, very difficult. And as the weather gets worse, logistics is going to get harder again. So right on just the absolute peak of the grey zone here, so right where this road meets, there's two main roads leading through Kopanki. On the northern one, we do see a video just in here. Let me measure that. So it's on the extreme edge of here. So 1.1 kilometers behind where the Russian forces are, we do see a geolocated footage here of a Russian flag being flown as that area comes under more control, of course threatening the salient that is growing around Raihodka as well. Now, let's move our way up into Kursk before we talk about missiles. Now, no changes shown on this map, but there are a couple of very interesting things. Now, this map is not liking me to update today, but it doesn't matter. I've got some screenshots that will be good enough. So we have seen Ukraine target a temporary bridge in here with a bomb as well, then damaging this as well. So taking out at least one section of that. It's hard to get an idea of a complete destruction of this, but it does look like it has been fairly heavily damaged, or particularly maybe destroyed as well. And this is important because this is across the same river. Now, I'm going to move this across, and so we can see the main area of then this push into Suja, Kursk, and then we can see the other one around Tyantkino as well. And the same river basically connects these two. Now, originally everyone was saying that Ukraine is going to be able to cut off and there's going to be thousands of Russians left in here. We didn't see that because we saw a Russian offensive out of Kotynovo, or through Kotynovo by the VDV and other elements to actually stop this happening, to push down to Snagorsk. Remember, this blue is all the way up into this area, but Ukraine is still managing to successfully target those bridges, what will have an effect on Russian logistics into this area. Now, let's zoom down a little bit and we come into here. So we have Suja, and this is Darino down here. So what I want to show you is this is Darino, and we look at where these like sheds are behind the line in here. So it's just in the center of these sheds, about 800 meters behind the line there. Close enough, give or take a little bit. We do see that several Ukrainian soldiers have surrendered to Russian forces in this area. So there are Russian forces working back there and just slowly grinding back the incursion into Kursk Oblast by the Ukrainian forces. So a big day on the maps, a lot changing, and we'll see if this momentum that Russia has. But I think the biggest threat for Russia is they overextend. That said, the way that it's just sort of grinding forward, it does at least alleviate some of that threat rather than deep maneuver. But again, we will see, and we'll see how winter then affects this. Now, I say I believe it will slow down for a bit, then the Fabs will destroy a lot, TOS 1s will destroy a lot, and then it may speed up next year, where someone like Alex, History Legends, he believes it will speed up throughout winter. Again, different opinions. We will wait and see what exactly happens. Now, of course, yesterday you couldn't get away from it. We talked about the medium-range ballistic missile fired into Dnipro. Now, we do have some footage of this flying through the atmosphere, and at least if something comes to kill us all, it will be very, very pretty in the sky on our last moments as this comes through. It reminds me of when Tesla, Elon Musk, fires bloody shit up into space, the real life Dr. Evil. So we have that. It's the first footage I've actually seen of it in the air. I haven't seen any launch of that yet. I don't know if we will. But I got sent this email, and this was very, very interesting as well. Now, what it's talking about is comments made in this video here from Dialogue works with Andriy Martyanov. Russian fires hypersonic ballistic missile, the ICBM, at Ukraine. So let's talk about this, as this is very interesting here. Mr. Martyanov mentioned the target was actually Yasmash, which is famous for a lot of the Soviet rocket technology, of course, but in Ukraine, in Dnipro. They've renamed it. There are two aspects here. Number one, Martyanov claims that a lot of the production is underground, so you need bunker breakers. So any production here is going to be underground in these old facilities. Number two, Ukraine recently spoke about having developed their own missiles. They have spoken a lot about these 1,000-kilometre ballistic missiles, and even some people speaking about nuclear. And I see more and more people speaking about nuclear. Go back a couple of videos, we spoke about why this won't happen. We spoke about the technical difficulties with the fuel to make that, and that will likely not be happening, and it would be a breaking of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. But again, where is Ukraine developing these missiles? Well, we know there's an area where there's going to be a lot of underground areas. A check confirms Yasmash is indeed located in Dnipro. I've confirmed this as well with my own research. So the use of that new missile may very well have not only been a political message to the West, can reach the UK where Storm Shadow was made, we know definitely a message in this, but also a practical purpose. See if the missile works and get through, but also make sense military, because other missiles will not be able to reach the vast underground production facilities. And this is what Fighter Bomber spoke about. Now, I don't know Fighter Bomber. I have no idea how much communication he does or does not have into the Russian military, how much is actually going on there. Probably a fair bit, but he did speak about, are these bunker busting? We said, it's probably likely like inert there. But again, the kinetic energy of something coming at Mark 10, Mark 11 is absolutely absurd. Again, a bullet will punch straight through body armour, or a large bullet, and that has nowhere near that speed or nowhere near that mass. They may easily counter the argument that the missile would be too expensive. Using Yasmash, or would be, or if they have, would be terrible for Ukraine. This is what we spoke about yesterday. People were quoting that this missile that Russia had fired, that MRBM, was around, in the tens of millions, maybe $40 million. But I've said, well, if it can take out $1 billion system, or it can prevent $1 billion of damage to Russia, it does make sense economically. And if this was what was targeted, well, it definitely would as well. And I'd hate to know how far, if one of those is made out of like tungsten or something, because that's what a sabot is. A sabot that a tank fires is basically just a tungsten dart going nowhere near that speed, or probably not even close to as big. What Putin has said about the new missile, this was from The Guardian. The president acknowledged in a television address to the nation that Moscow struck a Ukrainian military facility with a new ballistic missile, the Oreshnik. He said the deployment was a response to US plans to produce and deploy intermediate and short-range missiles, and that Russia would respond decisively and symmetrically in the event of escalation. Moscow said it targeted a missile and defence firm in the central Ukrainian city of Dnipro, where missile and space rocket company Pivdemash, which is the exact one we just spoke about, known as Yasmash by the Russians, is based. Remember, this was in the Soviet Union. They'll know exactly where that is. And the kinetic energy alone, the punch through, I don't know. Putin said Russia was developing short and medium range missiles in response to a planned production and then deployment of US medium and shorter range missiles in Europe and Asia. So you can see the ladder of escalation gets climbed more and more. And we are in Cold War 2.0. I don't think anyone can convince me anywhere else, because the US, they have reassessed their nuclear deterrence as well. But of course, RT has released this video as a level of propaganda too. So, speaking about this weapon system and how long it takes to reach targets. London in 20 minutes and Warsaw in 12. So this is a hell of a short time to try and intercept. Remember, the only chance you've got against something that has MIRV, so there's multiple independent re-entry vehicles. Now, these may be MIRV or maybe MRV. Are these 36 independents, or is it 6 independents in groups of 6? I more think it's like a 6x6, I believe, from what I have seen. But you need to intercept that before it breaks apart, or you don't have time, or you're not going to have just the interceptors to do it. So let's talk about what Putin has said in his address. A new system, which is called the Oreshnik, a ballistic missile with non-nuclear hypersonic capability. Now, I'd say that it definitely has some level of nuclear capability to be able to strap a bomb on it. Again, we will see. As we all know, based on the objective control data, he claims the test was a success. congratulate you on this. And I already said we will continue these tests, including some combat conditions, depending on the situation and the nature of the security threats posed to Russia. All the more, so we have a stockpile of such products, a reserve of such systems ready for use. So we need more of these. And this is a poking at the West, going depending on the situation and the nature of security threats posed to Russia. So we'll use more of these if those ATACMS Storm Shadows keep going in. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the Pentagon right now on what is being said. It'd be very interesting just to see what they are actually saying, not what's being said publicly, what's being said behind closed doors. Will we see more Storm Shadow, Scalp, and ATACMS strikes, or is that the end of it and we won't see the Oreshnik either? I don't know. In this context, it's important the Oreshnik system is not an upgrade of an old Soviet-era system, even though we are all originally from Soviet-era systems. We're all raised on the complements and previous generations. To a certain degree, we are built on their achievements. Now, if you read anything about like Russian culture, this is actually very common, this sort of building on past achievements. Now, this is called, I can't even pronounce this, but it basically means heritage or legacy, and it's a pride Russians take in accomplishments of their ancestors. Collective achievements are emphasized over individual accomplishments. You can see how the 20th century then occurred. But regardless, this is what he's getting at here, to try, I guess, to drum up a little bit more patriotism and maybe even help more recruitment into the war as well. But also trying to show, look, we're all together, what's happening in your side of the ditch. The weapon system is tested yesterday, serves as yet another reliable guarantor of Russia's territorial integrity and sovereignty. The question on these is, how expensive are they? How many does Russia have? And how accurate is it? No one else in the world has such weapons yet. As we and you know, indeed, sooner or later, other leading countries will have them. We know what kinds of designs are being worked on there. One thing the Soviets had, I don't know, we may know about the Russians in the future, because we know about the Soviets because it was all declass or leaked. It wasn't really declassified, it was leaked. Is they're very good at actually making analogues of systems. Notice how this looks, well, the Tu-160 looks a lot like this. Good example of it. I would emphasise one more aspect here. The Oreshnik missile is not just an effective hypersonic weapon due to its striking power, especially when used en masse and in combination with other long-range precision systems that Russia also has. Using it against enemy targets will be comparable to the effect of using strategic weapons. He's talking about nuclear weapons here. Now, this was the rods of God, tungsten telegraph poles dropped down from space, that at some point the kinetic energy is that much, it has basically the same effect as some other systems as well, but also in just that mass usage with other conventional systems too, we'll have then more of a problem. We saw this used with a number of other missiles and drones too. Although, in fact, the Oreshnik system is not a strategic weapon, in any case, it is not an intercontinental ballistic missile, and it is not a means of mass destruction, but also it is a high precision weapon. Again, we haven't seen any photographs of what was hit. That can tell us a lot too, that we haven't seen any photographs of what was hit. At the same time, I've already mentioned there are no means of countering such a missile, no means of intercepting it, and what we are seeing is Ukraine today, they're receiving a new NASAM system as well, but Ukraine is requesting THAAD as well, which is a newer, upgraded variant of air defense system. Will it intercept these? I don't believe so, but we will see. At least we'll see. Well, the footage came out instantly of this. I don't know if they can hide the strikes of this then occurring. There's still questions about whether the Patriot is actually intercepting the hypersonic Kinzhals and the other one, I forget the name of it at the moment. We need to launch serial production. He said essentially it's already been organised, so that it's been tested, successful. We need to get this into full production. It's also important, along with the Oreshnik system, several similar systems are currently being tested in Russia. Based on the test results, these weapons will also go into production. In other words, we have a whole line of medium and short range systems. So again, bit of saber rattling here, trying to scare that away, but we did see what looked to be a successful test of that system. Well, it definitely struck in an area, and it definitely got the eyes of the world. Now, Department of Defense adjusts nuclear deterrence strategy as nuclear peer adversaries escalate. We're now in a world, we're facing multiple nuclear competitors, multiple states that are growing, diversifying and modernising their nuclear arsenals, and also, unfortunately, prioritising the role that nuclear weapons play in their national security strategies. National security strategies, whether people like it or not, nuclear weapons are at the absolute forefront of that mutual assured destruction. That's why nuclear-powered countries use nuclear weapons every single day, even if people don't pick up on it, because they can act on the world stage differently to other states. It's not fair, but if you're 6'8" and bloody massive and can fight, it's not fair either. As security environment evolves, adjustments to the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review may be required to sustain the ability to achieve nuclear deterrence. So still fairly new, that's going under review. In light of enhanced nuclear capabilities of China and Russia and possible lack of nuclear arms control agreements after February. So will we see more of these agreements then fall apart? China hasn't signed as many as other nations in here, and there is a threat that Russia may give China some of that technology they are after, or tests as well that we are seeing. And there is a threat too to North Korea and Iran, with technology at least. Furthermore, the underlying logic of nuclear deterrence remains sound, although the US remains committed to safe, secure and reliable nuclear deterrent. The Security Administration undertaken steps to field capabilities to enhance nuclear deterrence and flexibility. These include these gravity bombs delivered by aircraft, and also then the nuclear-armed Ohio-class submarines, and they'll produce an upgraded variant of then this gravity bomb as well. So again, we are in an arms race Cold War, whether we like it or not, particularly with China, more so than Russia. But the areas which China is lacking, Russia can actually sort of fix that. Like, China's industry is massive, but things like grain is a problem, ports are a problem, and some very niche technology like nuclear propulsion, nuclear weapons is an submarine warfare can be a problem for China. That's why one of the things US don't want in here is that there is a formal military agreement signed between Russia and China. China doesn't have any formal military agreements, but the last thing that states wants is that. The report directs the US plans to deter multiple nuclear-armed adversaries simultaneously. Requires integration of non-nuclear capabilities where feasible to support the nuclear deterrence mission. One thing I will say, as far as I'm aware, no country in the world has the amount of interceptors to hit the amount of weapon systems that could be coming in a full-on, all-out war. This is why it's deterrence, because the president, whether sitting in the Kremlin or whether sitting in the White House or sitting wherever, they know that if they push that, their families are dead and everyone else's is too. So that is sort of the gun to each other's head and gun to everyone's head that is going on. That's why since the development of these weapons, we haven't seen the wars on the scale we saw in the decades prior to this. Stresses the importance of escalation management, planning for responding to a limited nuclear attack, a high consequence non-nuclear strategic attack, enables deeper consultation, coordination and combined planning with allies and partners in order to strengthen US extended deterrence commitments. The report also recognises that deterrence alone will not address strategic dangers. It recognises the arms control and risk reduction of nuclear non-proliferation play indispensable roles as well. This Vice Deputy Director for Strategic Ability of Joint Staff spoken about the range of scenarios for strategic circumstance the US might face alongside its allies going into the 2030s. So what may we actually be facing? What do we need to at least counter that or minimise the use of these? To be prepared for the 2030s, we have to modernise our nuclear forces, the nuclear command and control, and the associated infrastructure. It has to be flexible and allow over time for challenges to arise. So again, we will see. It's a very, very interesting thing with how quickly these weapon systems can hit areas, and that they need to get off your missiles to have a counterattack very, very quickly, and the decisions made need to be incredibly fast. This is why we're getting reports that the Kremlin rang the US, and I believe would have rung other nuclear powers around the world before they launched that Orshnik to try not to step into some sort of then bloody battle here. The problem I see of where these are potentially being launched from, if depending on the exact launch location, and this is hard to know, but there's a problem that the US talks about with China called nuclear entanglement, that they have conventional systems but in the same areas or even silos as some of the nuclear systems. And the problem is, much like other countries, a strike against nuclear facilities can be responded with nuclear weapons. The problem is the conventional weapons with this purpose to have nuclear entanglement, and it does look like this Orshnik, which we know is not a nuclear weapon. Is it? Putin says not nuclear capable. I think it probably likely is, but regardless, is that an area where there are conventional weapons too, and could strikes on these facilities lead to some level of nuclear entanglement? Again, not sure. Legends, have a fantastic day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye bye.